bedtime stories apparently, but I think Nathan has me beat there.
He's got that great microphone set up. I know he's got like a preamp on it, right?
Does this work? Is it phantom power? Maybe phantom power.
Phantom power, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
48 volts of pure bliss.
I remember you were on a podcast. I think you were on the WebRush podcast before, and I heard it, and I just was like, wow, I need to get that set up.
I need to get that jacket. That's what I need.
Yeah, we also got Craigory on the Q&A section here. We're just diving right in. Thanks for joining us, Craigory.
Yeah.
Craigory, great talk and in-depth material from start to finish. Just amazing. You got to watch that a couple times to take it all in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I when I saw those two talks back to back, I thought it was a really good combination there as far as talking about the different stacks and how you use NX to integrate in with those. So definitely had some chemistry there between those the placement of those talks anyway.
Craigory and I have some chemistry. We see each other in the evenings, and we watch Dateline and Bachelor together.
Oh, okay.
Dateline, huh?
Everyone loves a good murder mystery, right?
There you go.
Definitely.
The hard hitting stuff there. All right.
So I did bring out the Jelly Belly dispenser.
Yes, I was wondering when you were going to explain what this is. Are you going to pour the box of coffee into the jelly bean dispenser?
No.
No. Okay, that's probably a good idea.
Here, I'll show you how it works though. So there's a button down here. Just press it, and jelly beans come out the bottom.
What?
Okay.
And sometimes you get black ones, and you throw those away.
Definitely good call.
I'm gonna guess that those are the licorice color, the black licorice color ones that you just kind of throw away, right?
Though there's a blackberry one that's pretty good, and it looks kind of like it. So you have to put it under a light and inspect it to make sure you're not throwing away.
You have to bite just a tiny bit of it so you don't get too much of that taste in your mouth there.
I feel like lime is hard to find too, but lime is delicious.
Yeah. Is this one lime? This is probably green apple.
Okay,
see, that's the thing. Yeah.
We're going here now. What's your favorite jelly bean? We'll start with you, Nathan, and then we'll go with Craigory.
You know, probably the grape. They have a like, I don't know if it's a Fresca grape. What is that? It's just a wonderful grape flavor in a jelly bean. Love it.
There you go. What about you, Craigory? I guess the first question maybe, did you eat jelly beans, and what's your favorite?
I do eat them. I think my favorite are probably the lime, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Mm-hmm.
I have been to the Jelly Belly factory. I don't know if you've been, Jeff, but it's not too far from where you used to live, I think.
Yeah.
Can't remember the name of that city.
I think my kids might have gone, like my wife and kids might have gone while I was working one point, or we talked about going, but I unfortunately have never been able to go.
It is a lot of fun. It is kind of like Willy Wonka's. It feels like you're in the chocolate factory for sure.
Yeah. Very cool.
It's fun. All right. Should we talk about what we came here to talk about?
Yes, we should.
All right.
I'll dive right in here. Craigory, we'll get into some of the questions that we had for the talks that you get or people ask about in here. But I'll say personally, I've seen the .NET plugin be requested many times in the community Slack and even on Twitter and things like that. So what motivated you to kind of take that dive and go ahead and try to make a plugin that the community could use for that?
Yeah, so in Nx 12, we released the ability to extend the project graph for community plugins. And once you do that, you're not relying on implicit dependencies anymore for Nx affected or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And that's really where you start to get a ton of benefit from the plugins. And that's what pushed me over the edge into starting on it.
Okay, so you had done some work on it already, but then that piece of being able to extend the project graph was kind of the last bit that you needed?
It was something that was kind of bouncing around in my head before then, but hadn't typed anything yet.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Oh, this is another good one that we come up with in Node and Angular projects a lot. Is it possible to share interfaces between the two, or is there anything special you have to do there?
Yeah, so with C Sharp and Angular or any other TypeScript project, you're going to have a little bit of issue with that just because the interfaces are in a different language. But you can use something like Swagger Docs or Protobuf or anything like that, where you can then generate your interfaces in both languages,
Mm-hmm.
or have the Swagger Doc generated by your .NET API and then generate your TypeScript interfaces from that. And that's generally the path I would recommend.
Oh, I see. Cool.
I think it's also, Craigory, it's nice to note that .NET plugin was like an immediate need, so Nx, even if there wasn't official support for that, you just were able to roll up a plugin and make something that you needed right away work in Nx. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, and that plugin was relatively straightforward once it got started.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, very cool. On the native script side, I just saw something. This kind of passed by my radar the other day, Nathan. Like, what are some new things in native script that because you talked about native script and kind of in studio in your talk. Anything new that you want to highlight there?
Open source projects take a lot to manage. I think when it comes to like tooling, I think a lot of questions have come up of interest around why do you need tooling around things to manage source code, and I think it is hard to understand that on the surface when you're kind of looking at a single project. But open source is often kind of a collection of a lot of projects. And so the second you start to multiply that is where you start to really kind of struggle to find what can make it easier. And I think the biggest thing really is consistency, because if you want to be efficient at anything, I think you have to have some level of consistency just to avoid the mental overload, if nothing else. But everyone likes to add their own flavor and touch onto things, which is great. The individualism is awesome in open source. But I think at the same time, if a singular group is going to manage a large amount of source code, that consistency is a must. So for sure, for us and everyone who's involved in managing native script, that consistency is huge.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think that. Well, you alluded to it in your talk also, but having that consistency there makes it easier for the maintainers and then even for contributors coming in, to where they don't have to, like say, look a lot of different places on how to run things, and it makes it easier for them to contribute if they're trying to get involved in the project also.
I feel like one of the things that probably is not talked about too much with TypeScript-based projects is how consistency affects TypeScript, because certainly I've seen many of different project setups that encounter different TypeScript issues, and they can often be related to project setup, like organizational level setup, and just like subtleties can creep in with TypeScript setup. And I think that too is probably not talked about a whole lot. But the more, it's not bad to look out there and say, well, someone's got this organization out there that works. Let's try to use that. And even if you don't understand it on the surface, like, you got to give it a try, because, community standards are great. I think that's where people can really reach out and help each other, is when those standards do exist, because usually the problems you encounter will be similar too.
Yep, definitely so. Like you talked about having to like collect these repos or bring these, like organize all these projects and things, or did you have any like pain points there while you do that process of, like you said, making things more consistent in the project?
I think definitely initially with dealing with some repos that were set up differently. So it was more about bringing the inconsistency that was so diverse together, because if you're trying to bring it together, it sort of feels like a little bit of a rigid battle at times, because you feel like you're gaining some maintenance wins initially, but then as you start to bring in more inconsistency and try to make it consistent, it can feel like sort of a rocky road. But once you kind of get past the initial kind of pushing up the mountain of that, it starts to really, you start to feel it. So I would say for anyone out there who does struggle with it in the beginning, hang in there, because it will come together, and when it comes full circle, you it's worth it.
Yeah.
Is everything in a single repository now with native script?
Only some of it. I think that's been a big debate.
By the way, I was watching her talk. I just got distracted. I'm sorry if you already said that.
No. I didn't touch on that specifically, but I think that's a general concern and question with monorepos in general. In fact, I would say the pain point initially with Nx is that when we first started talking about it, everyone thought that, oh my gosh, no way can we put everything all together. And I think that's one of those other misconceptions. It's not a point of bringing everything together. It's a point of bringing the logical pieces together that make sense together. And so, like, a lot of plugin developers that were out there in the community were like, no way am I bringing these plugins into this, workspace. And the answer is, well, don't. Like, you don't have to. So I think it makes sense for logical units. So to answer that question, the core library of NativeScript is in a single repo alongside with Webpack. And it makes sense to manage those together because everything in the core ecosystem is kind of pivoted on the Webpack setup. So it allows us to develop source code in core against the latest Webpack setups. And we can kind of, sometimes those interplay together. Like there's flags in core that may work with the Webpack setup. So those are logical units that make sense together. Plugins are plugins. So, plugins can exist in their own, groupings and however you break that down. So we have several Nx setups, not just one singular one.
Yeah. And that's true of people we work with too. Like we work with lots of big companies, and not a single one of them has one Nx workspace. It's like either the organization has one that all the teams are in, or even individual teams have them, and that's what makes sense for them. You don't have to go full monorepo for everyone
If it were me, I probably would. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I
One
like
step at a time.
I like managing the source code all together for sure. And I do understand the fear that most people have when you haven't developed that way, because it does feel quite a bit different, I think, than what you may have been used to. But TypeScript's gotten so good in VS Code, in the resolution level, like TS configs, and how that works, is so optimized. It's really a nice experience. I mean, if anyone had tried to mess with that maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago, I don't think it's quite even to the level that it is today. So they've really optimized that.
Yeah, question for Craigory, the .NET is like an ecosystem unto itself. How have you seen how .NET has evolved, and kind of I'm assuming you've used it pretty heavily in other projects. So how does the evolution of .NET and then moving it into an Nx plugin, how does that work for you in different projects? Is it usually the .NET projects are isolated from everything else, or have you seen that kind of where they're grouped together in a monorepo also?
Yeah, so with .NET, it can kind of go either way. All of your microservices could be under the same solution file in Visual Studio if you wanted, but it doesn't have to be. And that's kind of like the .NET monorepo thing. It's just having that solution file. One thing with the Nx.NET plugin is that we don't break any of that tooling expectations. So if you want to open up your projects in Visual Studio, or even create new projects through Visual Studio, those can all be picked up by Nx really quickly without any pain. So, and that's one of the things that you just kind of have to focus on when you're working on a plugin for language that uses a different tooling system, is just not breaking those expectations.
Yeah, I see.
Craigory, I'm curious, do you know a big .NET?
Oh, Nathan, only the moderator is allowed to ask. You can't talk to the other panelists.
Excuse me.
But, okay, go ahead. We'll make an allowance.
Craigory, do you know of any big desire in the .NET community that the plugin you would like to deliver in the plugin that maybe is not there right now? Is there something that you know of off the top of your head, or have people pinged you?
Yeah, so like the most requested feature for the plugin that's not there right now goes back to the TypeScript interface generation and sharing those models. So that's something that I've been thinking about and working on getting put together, but it's not there just yet.
Got it.
And
That's
now
good to
that
know.
does come more from like the NX community than the .NET community, right? But it's kind of pushing those together.
Yeah, and I think you kind of talked about that earlier when you mentioned like using Swagger or something like that to generate or to use that as kind of a bridge between the two.
Yeah, so like a lot of .NET projects already use Swagger because it has first-class support. If you just run .NET new web API, it already comes with Swagger set up. So once you have that set up, there's some tooling that you can install on the .NET side that'll let you generate that to a JSON file. And like I said, the process should be pretty simple, but it's not something that's there yet.
Yeah. Always something else new to add, or a new feature that can make that process a little more seamless there. But looking forward to more things coming to that plugin and definitely with in Studio.
I'm curious if the Norwell team experiences the same, because I feel like anytime you see a feature, everyone says, "Well, that's cool, but I want this as well." So it's kind of like the more it can do on the surface, the more people ask for it to do.
Yeah, I definitely think that I definitely agree with that. Maintaining open source projects myself, you always get that. There's always that balance of people wanting to put some things, if not everything, into the core of the libraries or core of the platform, and then you kind of have to balance that with, what you want to do as far as where the vision of the project is. So definitely some push and pull
99%
there.
of being a good open source maintainer is saying no to the right things.
Or yes, but you can create that on top of this, and we can both win. I think that's a valid answer in some cases also.
Yep. Yeah, that's. I mean, I think our biggest focus right now is probably the plugin. I mean, we're working on some plugins, but like making plugins more extensible and more powerful, so that you're not stuck. You're not dependent on core to implement things. You can do more things yourself outside of core.
Yeah, that was another thing that Nathan had in his talk I found was really interesting, that they created a package for their own migrations. So that way it helps their consumers of XPlat to move forward along with the platform and make that even those upgrades to the platform for them even easier.
The migrations might be the unspoken hero from our standpoint, for sure. I know you all talk about it and talk about the best you can, but there's so much that can be talked about in terms of the longevity and sustainability that the migration structure provides. It's just a huge aspect of what you get.
Yeah, definitely something we should talk about more. We were probably over time, but we had another question that I'm interested in, Nathan, for the native script repository. How are you using NX for build? Like, are you using Affected and NX Cloud, and like what's the setup look like?
All of that is on the table to use. Yes. I would say the reason we are not using Affected yet is because of how we worked in the Objective-C and Java builds. And I think we want to get the outputs set up right to kind of do that well. And I think once we get that right, then we will probably engage with NX Cloud even more to get some of that distributed caching. But I think until we get the outputs configured in the way that I think is beneficial to our setup, then I think we can engage with NX Cloud properly.
Cool. You let us know. We're here for you.
Thank you.
Yes, got to throw that Nx Cloud plug in there, free for open source projects. So if you want to use that there also and take advantage of that, it's there.
Yep.
With that, Craigory, Nathan, thank you. Thank you for the talks; they were great. Thank you for the Q&A. We really appreciate you being a part of Nx Conf.
Thanks for giving us NX.
Yeah, thanks.